Imagine you wake up tomorrow and your entire schedule is gone. No alarm. No meeting at 9. No inbox waiting. No boss. No shift. Nothing. Just you, the morning light, and one question. What do you actually want to do today? For most people, that question creates anxiety, because somewhere along the way, we stopped knowing how to answer it. But for 99% of human history, that was just Tuesday. Before farming. Before cities. Before money existed. Before anyone could own your time. Humans woke up every single morning with no obligations, no employer, and no concept that their hours belonged to anyone but themselves. And what they did with that time is one of the most fascinating things anthropologists have ever uncovered. Because it wasn't what you'd expect. Let's go back about 30,000 years. You wake up at dawn inside a small shelter. The fire from last night is still breathing, just barely. The people around you are beginning to move. Someone adds wood. Someone passes food left over from yesterday.
And the morning begins the way every morning begins.
Slowly. Socially. Without urgency. Here's the thing that surprises most people when they first hear it. Surviving as an ancient human didn't actually take that long. In 1963, archaeologist Richard Lee spent time with the Juhansi people in Botswana, one of the few remaining groups still living in a way that closely mirrors pre-agricultural human life. What he found quietly dismantled one of our deepest assumptions about the ancient world. Adults were spending roughly 17 hours per week acquiring food. That's about 2.5 days. The rest of the time, they did whatever they wanted. And this wasn't a lucky anomaly. Anthropologists have found the same pattern everywhere they've looked. The Hadza in Tanzania. The Aceh in Paraguay. The Martu in Australia. Different continents, different climates, completely different environments. Same result. About 15 to 20 hours per week spent on survival. The rest was theirs. For context, you probably work more than twice that. Now the obvious question, if ancient humans weren't spending all day hunting and gathering, what were they actually doing? The bones give us part of the answer. When researchers compare ancient human skeletons to skeletons from early farming populations, the difference is hard to ignore. Farmers were shorter. Their spines showed damage from years of repetitive labor. Their teeth were riddled with decay from grain-heavy diets. They had arthritis in their spines from repetitive labor, and they died younger. Ancient human skeletons, taller, stronger, healthier teeth, less joint damage. Their bones tell a clear story. They were doing less repetitive physical labor, not more. But the most unexpected evidence isn't in the bones. It's in the walls. In 1994, explorers discovered Chauvet Cave in southern France. Painted inside were images created roughly 30,000 years ago. Horses mid-gallop. Lions caught mid-stare. Rhinoceroses rendered with shading and perspective. This wasn't survival. This was someone spending hours, maybe days, deep inside a cave by firelight, making something beautiful for no practical reason at all. In Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found shell beads dating back 100,000 years. Tiny holes drilled through seashells clearly intended to be strung together and worn. The nearest coastline was 20 kilometers away. Someone walked 40 kilometers round trip just to collect shells, then spent hours carefully drilling holes with stone tools. To look good. In Germany, researchers found a 40,000-year-old flute carved from vulture bone. 5 finger holes, precisely spaced. Whoever made this understood music, understood pitch, spent real time on it. Not for hunting, not for defense, for something to listen to. These finds are everywhere, across Africa, Europe, Asia. Decorated objects. Elaborate tools, far more refined than survival required. Evidence of sustained, focused effort with no immediate practical payoff. Ancient humans weren't just surviving. They were creating. They were expressing. They were making the world more interesting to live in. So, what did a full day actually look like? You wake up at dawn. Eat something left from the day before. The morning is slow and social. If food is needed, a small group leaves to hunt or gather. But not every day. If yesterday's hunt was successful, you might not go at all. You might spend the morning sharpening tools, working animal hide, weaving something. Not because someone told you to, because being skilled matters. Because competence earns respect. Because making things well is part of being human. If there's a hunt, it probably takes 3 to 6 hours, including travel. Humans are persistence hunters. We track animals at a steady pace for hours, outlasting them through sheer endurance. And the ability to sweat. Most animals can't regulate body temperature while running. We can. Then the animal is carried back and butchered. Everyone eats. And by early afternoon, the productive part of the day is essentially over. What comes next is the part modern people find hardest to understand. Nothing and everything. People rest. They sit in the shade and talk. They play with children. They groom each other, reinforcing bonds the way all social primates do. They carve small designs into bone and stone. They nap without guilt. Anthropologist James Woodburn documented that among the Juhansi adults spent roughly 6 hours per day in what he called social time. Not working. Not sleep at? Just being with other people. Talking. Existing together. In a world without contracts or currency, your survival depended entirely on your relationships. If people didn't like you, they didn't have to share food when your hunt failed. So you invested enormous time into those bonds. Not because it was productive, because it was how humans stayed safe. Then the sun went down, and something remarkable happened around the fire. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Weissner recorded hundreds of hours of conversation among the Juhansi. During the day, conversations were practical. Who saw animal tracks where? Which plants were ready for harvest? But at night, 81% of conversations shifted completely. Stories. Myths about how the world began. Tales of ancestors. Jokes that made everyone laugh. Adventures from far away. Weissner argued this is where human culture was actually born. Gods. Spirits. The past. The future. Things you can only think about when you're safe and full and sitting beside fire with people you trust. And even sleep looked different. Historical records and controlled sleep studies both confirm that before artificial light, humans slept in 2 phases. A first sleep of about 4 hours, then a quiet waking period of 1 to 2 hours in the dark. Used for reflection, conversation, sometimes intimacy. Then a second sleep until dawn. What we now call waking up at 2 a.m. and panicking about it was just a normal part of being human. Then, roughly 10,000 years ago, something changed. Agriculture. And agriculture, it turns out, was a trap. Once you start farming, you can feed more people. More people means you need more food. More food means more farming. Within a few generations, populations exploded, and there was no going back. Too many mouths now depended on the fields to survive any other way. And farming demanded far more labor. Plowing, planting, weeding, harvesting, storing, defending. The skeletal evidence is unambiguous. Early farmers worked harder, ate worse, and died younger than the hunter-gatherers who came before them. But the population kept growing. And with larger populations came specialization. Toolmakers, potters, priests, administrators, and eventually, the thing we now take as simply a part of life, jobs. The idea that your time belonged to someone else in exchange for resources. The original human lifestyle didn't disappear because it failed. It disappeared because it couldn't feed enough people. Progress consumed it. Today, you spend roughly 90,000 hours of your life working. Your ancestors spent a fraction of that just to survive. You sleep in one collapsed block and call waking at 2 a.m. a disorder. They slept in 2 phases and used the quiet middle hours for thinking. You make art if you can find time after everything else. They made art because time was simply what they had. They weren't waiting to retire. They were already living it. Which raises an uncomfortable question. When we talk about how far humans have come, what exactly do we mean? We built cities and medicines and machines that can leave the planet. Those things are genuinely remarkable. But somewhere in the process, we also traded something away. The unhurried morning. The afternoon with nowhere to be. The fire at night and the stories that only come when nothing urgent is demanding your attention. Ancient humans didn't have jobs. They had time. And they filled it with exactly the things humans fill time with when nobody is watching and nothing is required. They talked. They created. They played. They rested. They told each other stories in the dark. Not because it was useful, because it was human.